Hello, everyone, and welcome. Today, we're going to explore a wild idea that people sometimes ask. What if we could get rid of all our garbage by throwing it into volcanoes? Every year, humans produce billions of tons of trash. Plastic bottles, food waste, old electronics, and everything in between piles up in landfills and clogs our oceans. It's one of the biggest problems our modern world faces. So, at first, the thought sounds brilliant. Volcanoes are hot, powerful, and constantly erupting. Why not use them as giant natural incinerators? Imagine this. Instead of mountains of trash sitting for centuries, we load up trucks, planes, or even rockets and drop it all into the fiery craters of volcanoes. The intense heat could melt plastics, burn organic waste, and turn solid garbage into nothing but ash and gas. It sounds like a perfect solution, right? But as we'll see, things aren't that simple. At first glance, throwing trash into volcanoes might seem like a clever fix, but reality is far more complicated. Volcanoes are not just giant burning holes waiting for garbage. They are dangerous, unpredictable geological systems. If we dropped waste into an active volcano, the extreme heat could indeed burn some of it. Organic materials like food scraps or paper would quickly ignite and vanish. Plastics and metals might melt down, though not always completely. But the real problem lies in what happens next. When trash burns, especially plastics and chemicals, it releases toxic gases. In a confined space like a volcanic crater, those gases wouldn't just disappear. They'd mix with volcanic fumes, producing even more hazardous emissions. Instead of solving our pollution problem, we'd be creating deadly clouds of chemicals and greenhouse gases. And then there's the danger of explosions. Adding waste, especially if it contains liquids or pressurized materials, could trigger violent reactions. Imagine a volcano erupting not only with lava, but also with burning trash and toxic smoke shooting into the sky. It would be less like waste disposal and more like creating a massive environmental disaster. So while the idea sounds appealing, the science suggests it might be far riskier than helpful. One of the biggest issues with the trash and volcanoes idea is scale. Humans generate an astonishing over 2 billion tons of waste every year, and that number keeps growing as populations and consumption increase. Now, compare that to volcanoes. There are only about 1,500 potentially active volcanoes on Earth, and only a few dozen erupt in any given year. Even then, eruptions are unpredictable, and not all volcanoes have open craters where you could just drop trash inside. Most are remote, dangerous, or sealed by hardened rock until an eruption occurs. Even if we found a handful of volcanoes to use, the logistics would be overwhelming. Imagine transporting billions of tons of trash up steep volcanic mountains, often in unstable regions where roads don't even exist. The fuel, equipment, and manpower needed to haul so much waste would create more pollution than it solves. And let's not forget, the volume of trash would be enormous compared to what volcanoes could actually burn. Lava flows and eruptions handle vast amounts of molten rock, but dumping waste into them is like tossing a cup of water into a raging furnace. It won't even make a difference. So, in terms of both practicality and scale, volcanoes could never keep up with humanity's trash problem. Let's imagine for a moment that we somehow overcame the challenges of transporting trash and actually managed to dump massive amounts into volcanoes. What would happen then? First, the air quality around the volcano would become catastrophic. Burning plastics, rubber, and electronics would release toxic chemicals like dioxins, furans, and heavy metals. Combined with volcanic gases, such as sulfur dioxide, the atmosphere could turn into a poisonous mix capable of harming both humans and wildlife. Local communities would face acid rain, lung-damaging smog, and contaminated water sources. Second, the act of throwing waste into volcanoes could change eruptions themselves, adding foreign materials, especially if they include water or volatile chemicals, might cause explosive steam reactions. Instead of quiet lava flows, we could see violent blasts throwing burning trash and ash miles into the air. The result could be natural disasters triggered not by Earth itself, but by human interference. Third, this method would do nothing to address the core issue: our overproduction of waste. Dumping trash into volcanoes might look like it makes the problem disappear, but in reality, it only transforms it into another form of pollution, poisoning the air instead of filling landfills and oceans. So rather than solving the waste crisis, this approach would likely make environmental problems worse. If using volcanoes isn't the answer, what realistic solutions could help us deal with the enormous waste problem? Scientists and environmentalists argue that the key lies not in destroying trash after it's created, but in preventing it from piling up in the first place. One major step is reducing single-use plastics. These items, bottles, bags, straws, and packaging, make up a huge portion of global waste, and many of them end up polluting the oceans. By banning or replacing them with biodegradable alternatives, countries can cut millions of tons of trash every year. Another solution is recycling and upcycling. Instead of treating waste as something to throw away, we can see it as a resource. Metals, glass, paper, and even plastics can be recycled into new products. Some countries already recycle over 90% of certain materials, proving it's possible if the systems are strong enough. Then there's waste-to-energy technology. Modern incinerators can burn trash at extremely high temperatures while capturing the harmful gases, generating electricity in the process. While not perfect, this method is far cleaner and more efficient than tossing garbage into a volcano. Finally, composting and circular economy models encourage us to rethink the entire life cycle of products. Instead of take, use, throw away, we aim for reuse, repair, recycle. In this way, waste isn't something we dump, but part of a continuous loop. So, while throwing trash into volcanoes may sound dramatic, smarter, safer, and more sustainable solutions already exist, and they're within our reach if we choose to use them. So, what if we dumped our trash into volcanoes? At first, the idea seems clever, using Earth's fiery power to erase our waste. But in reality, it's a dangerous myth. Volcanoes are unpredictable. Transporting garbage to them is impossible on a large scale, and burning trash inside them would release more toxic gases and pollution than it removes. Instead of solving the waste crisis, we'd be creating new disasters. The truth is, there's no shortcut to fixing the problem of human trash. We can't simply throw it in a fire and hope it disappears. Real solutions lie in smarter choices: reducing plastic use, recycling materials, converting waste into energy, and rethinking how we design and consume products in the first place. In the end, the volcano idea teaches us something important. Our waste problem isn't about finding a magical place to hide it. It's about learning responsibility. Because if we don't, we may find that the real volcano is our own planet, heating up and choking on the pollution we create. So maybe the real question isn't why not use volcanoes, but how can we stop producing so much trash in the first place?